Hello and welcome to an Introduction to Scratch 3.0 Part 1. My name is Laura, and today we're going to be learning about sprites. Sprites are two-dimensional images that can be characters, obstacles, words, buttons, or anything. Sprites first appeared in arcades. They were created to make it easier for games to load graphics and display characters by having sprites move over the screen without affecting the background. A sprite's movement, appearance, and interactions are controlled by sets of instructions that can be triggered by the player, by other sprites, or that can work independently. Whether it's a walk cycle animation, a power-up being revealed, or an enemy turtle dragon breathing fire, sprites made early video games more engaging and fun. And sprites are still used today, online, in games, and in animations. Sprites are easy to use and customizable, which make them great learning tools for beginner coders. And typically one of the first things that you do when starting a new project in Scratch is to choose a sprite. So, let's get started. Go to scratch.mit.edu and create a free account with your email address. Or you can sign in with your existing account. When you're ready, click Create at the top of the screen and meet me in the Inside Project view. Before we begin, head on up to the top of the screen where it says Untitled and give your new project a name. I'm going to call mine Learning Sprites. Alright, so let's get to know the sprite that Scratch starts us out with. This is the cat that is over here on the stage. Now the stage is this big blank area where the sprite appears in. And just over top of it, you can change how you want that view to look. You can hit that first button to make the stage really small, say if you wanted more room when you were coding. You can hit the middle button, which brings it back to that first view that we saw before. Or you can hit these four arrows to make everything full screen. And to go back to the regular view, just hit those four arrows pointing inward to get back to here. So the stage is where you will see your project play out as you build it. And right now, all we really have on our stage is our sprite. And there's a couple of different things we can do with the sprite. We can use the sprite pane just below the stage here to give our sprite a name. Right beside there, we have the coordinates of where our sprite is currently on the stage. Right now it's set to 0, 0, which means that it's right in the center. But if I click and drag the sprite anywhere, or put in different numbers into these input spaces, I can change where that sprite appears on the stage. Just below the name, we can choose whether to hide or show our sprite. We can change the size of our sprite. Right now it's at 100%, so that's full size. But we can bump that up to, say, 200, make it really, really big. Or we can reduce it down to 50, make Scratch Cat tiny. Let's just leave it at 100 for now though. And right beside there, we can change the direction that the sprite is facing. So we can use this visual wheel right here to see that it's pointed at a 90-degree angle to the right, and we can click and drag this arrow around the wheel to change the direction that that sprite is facing. And again, let's just input 90 at the bottom here just to make sure that it's facing in the right direction. What else can we do with the sprite? Look no further than the top of the left side of the screen where you will see the Costumes tab. Now right now we're in the Coding tab, which is where you can build your scripts to create your project. But we're going to just click on the Costumes tab beside it where that paintbrush is. And it'll bring us to this nice editing view of whatever sprite we have currently selected. And so right now we have Scratch Cat on this nice canvas where we can use all of these different tools, very similar to Microsoft Paint, in order to interact with it. You can also see on the far left, we have two different versions of our sprite that didn't show up before, and it looks as though when we switch between them, that they're walking. These are called costumes, and a lot of sprites have costumes, and you can create additional costumes for them to make them look like they're walking, talking, changing color, whatever you'd like. Right now, we're editing in vector graphics. This means that you can interact with individual parts of this sprite, and you can see that where these blue lines show up when I'm hovering my mouse over top of each different body part of the cat. For example, if I click and drag the head over, I can also move arms around, I can change which direction the arms are facing, same with legs, and I can create an entirely different sprite if I really wanted to. Like so. Isn't it beautiful? And of course, if there's anything that you do that you really don't like, you can hit that little back arrow at the top of the editing screen to undo all of your changes and get back to where you're comfortable with. Now, because we're in vector graphics, where all these smooth lines and curves are, we can also manipulate those to make them look the way we really want them to look. So right beside that pointer arrow tool is the pointer with the circle underneath it. This is called the reshape tool. And of course, if you're ever confused about what any of these tools do, just hover your mouse over top of one of them and that little pop-up will show up telling you what it does. But let's use that reshape tool. And let's click, for example, on the mouth, and you'll see it has all these different circles show up. These are points that you can edit in that shape to manipulate it to make it look however you'd like. For example, let's say I want to make this mouth a little bit bigger. Perfect. Maybe Scratch Cat's really surprised by something. And you can even create new points by clicking on the lines that don't have circles on them. You can do this with any of the different shapes, making eyes really big, making ears longer or different shaped. And it's really neat because, for example, if I drew a square right here, I could use that reshape tool to change the shape into whatever I wanted it to look like. But say you didn't want to start out with this cat in the first place. Well, down at the bottom of the sprite pane, there's that little thumbnail of where the cat is and a small garbage can just above it. If you click that garbage can, it will delete the sprite from your stage. Let's give it a try. There we go, it's gone. But that's no problem. We can use Scratch's extensive library to find any sprite that we want to use in our project. You can find that library down at the bottom of the sprite pane where there's a blue circle with a cat face and a plus sign in it. If you hover your mouse over top of that menu, you can find the magnifying glass, or just hover your mouse over top of the cat face to choose a sprite from the library. And let's see what that does. So when you click on it, it will bring you to Scratch's library. There's tons of different things in here, and you can use any of them in your project. And just a reminder that sprites can be anything, from people to fruit to buttons to words to animals. And the Scratch library makes it easy for you to kind of pick between them by offering these categories at the top of the screen. So if I was building a project entirely with animals, I could click animals, and there you have it. I could pick any from any of the ones in front of me. You'll also notice that when I hover my mouse over some of them, they start to move. And this is because, just as we saw before on that editing screen, that sprites have certain costumes that they come with. And by using coding, you could make them change between those costumes really fast, kind of like a flip book, to make it look as though they're moving or interacting with the space they're in. I'm going to bring back Scratch Cat to our project. But there's more that we can do with sprites, and you can add as many different sprites as you want. So let's go back to that sprite menu. And one of the other options that it gives us are these little stars that says surprise. Scratch will pick at random from its library and load in a sprite to surprise you. This can be great to bring you inspiration on a project, or to just help you when you're not feeling that creative. Today we got a bear. Excellent. I'm going to make this bear a little smaller. But there were some other options in that sprite menu, so let's take another look. We can paint a sprite, so let's give that a try. Once we click on that, it'll take us to that editing view that we saw before, except that there's no sprite there, and that's because we can draw, at this point, whatever we'd like. So I invite you to use your creativity to create whatever you'd like, and I will do the same. Okay, I have created this turtle, and I'm just going to move that off to the side there and maybe reduce the size of it as well, just because it's a little big. Excellent, a tiny turtle. Perfect. But there's more that we can do with the sprite menu, so let's head back there. The last option on that menu is to upload a sprite. I've previously saved some images from unsplash.com, which is an amazing copyright-free image website, and I encourage you to go there as well to try this activity. Let's choose this one and give it a try. Perfect. So as it's loaded in, you can see that it's a very big image, and also the ocean that's behind this turtle is kind of blocking out everything else on the stage. But we can fix that. Let's head over to the Costumes tab again and do some editing. You'll notice that a lot of the editing tools in the Costumes tab now look quite different, and that's because it's suddenly converted us to bitmap graphics so that we can edit the individual pixels that make up this real-world image. One of the easiest ways to edit pixels is to just erase the stuff you don't want. So I'm going to use the eraser tool and get rid of all this ocean and hopefully just leave behind the turtle. Good enough. To make editing easier for you in the sprite editing view, you can use those magnifying glasses just over there to increase the image or decrease the image as you need to. And there you have it. You probably did a better job than me, but at least now we have this uploaded sprite. And again, I'm just going to reduce the size of it so that it's not overwhelming the screen. Oh, I missed a bit. Since we're in the Costumes tab, you might have noticed that the sprites that we just created don't have additional costumes. However, the sprites that we got from Scratch's library did come with multiple costumes. For example, this bear has several that make it look as though it is walking. But we can add additional costumes to these sprites to make their animations more interesting. For example, let's click on the cat. And you'll see that it already has 2 costumes, but I seem to remember that there was a different version of the cat in the Scratch library that maybe I want to add to this sprite to give it more range of motion. So just below, at the very bottom of the Costumes tab, we have another cat face with a plus sign, and this is the Costume menu. And it'll say very clearly when you hover your mouse over top of the cat face or the magnifying glass that you can choose a costume. So let's try that. Again, you'll get to Scratch's library, where it's taken every single possible costume and put them on display for you to look for. I'm going to type in cat to the search bar, and there we have it. I see that there's cat flying A and cat flying B. So I'm going to include cat flying B, and now I can make it look as though the cat is walking and then maybe taking flight. Another easy way to add a costume is to just duplicate an existing costume. For example, let's pick that sprite that we drew from Scratch. If you hover your mouse over top of costume 1, which is the default way that it will be presented in your project, you can just right click on it, select duplicate from the drop down menu, and now you have 2 costumes. So the second costume you can alter it any way that you'd like. I recommend, just for learning purposes, to go in with your selection arrow and to change the color. Great, so now it looks as though our turtle is changing color. We can also paint an additional costume by using the costume menu and clicking on that paintbrush. So in here you could draw something totally different that you want your sprite to turn into, or slightly alter the existing one again. Okay, so I've created a turtle shell instead, so maybe my turtle is hiding. It looks a little bit like a deflated soccer ball, but let's just use our imagination. Let's choose that other sprite that we uploaded and go back to the costumes menu where we can choose to upload a costume. I have another image of a turtle that I'd like to use, and I will erase the background to just leave the turtle again. Okay, there we have it. We have our second turtle on the screen, and that turtle can now transform into a giant turtle at whim. The costumes menu also gives you an option to upload a picture using a camera. However, just for privacy reasons, I recommend mainly using those copyright-free images if you can. So one of the main features of a sprite is that they kind of move or exist over top of a static background. And right now we don't really have much of a background, it's just this boring blank white space. If you click on where it says stage on the far right side of the screen, you'll be able to see that there's backdrop 1. Backdrop 1 is this just big blank area where we can use the same editing screen to draw a background, or we can choose a backdrop, as they call it, from the backdrop menu, using the same options that we've explored before. I'm going to ask for a surprise, but feel free to look through Scratch's extensive backdrop library to get some inspiration for your project. Let's see what it gives us. Wonderful! A brilliant celebration of Scratch. So that concludes part 1 of this Introduction to Scratch 3.0. Next time, we'll be using blocks to build scripts for the sprites that we created today. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you in part 2.